It's time to move to our next speakers and speech presented by our partner designers from Yaya. Yaya is a British design consultancy that helps design human-friendly products. Paul talked already about engaging the end user in the process, so this is exactly what we're going to cover now. Yaya has been partnering with us on a number of projects, and we can confidently say that these folks are real experts. So today we have two designers from Yaya here with us. It's UI and brand designer Phil Tait and designer Emilio Severi. They will share the best practices of human-friendly UX and UI design that any software engineer can use to improve their product. Guys, welcome. The stage is yours.
All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you, Paul, for a really interesting piece there. It's really interesting. Well, it's a great segue into our presentation about human-centered design when you're talking about a lot of how you have to think about when you're designing software, putting a user at the forefront of everything. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today about what we do here at Yaya Digital Consultancy. It's a great privilege to actually be able to speak to so many aspiring software engineers and the like who we hope by signing up to watch this webinar are interested in the topic of human-centered design and what it can offer you in the business. So we will be covering three main topics in our presentation today, all of which are focused on the central theme of human-centered design. Firstly, why you should care how it can impact the outcomes of your software. Secondly, what is human-centered design and what is the framework that we here at Yaya follow? And thirdly, how do we go about implementing this framework into our approach of our work at Yaya? Excuse me. There we go. So I'm Phil, and I'm a brand and UI designer with a special interest in human-centered product design and designing interfaces that users love to use. That's the bottom line. I've got 15 years of experience within the industry and have worked on a wide range of projects, ranging from bringing alcohol brands to market to redesigning digital onboarding journeys of security SaaS platforms.
Right, and then as you can see, my name is Emilio. I'm a UI UX designer at Yaya, and my main aspect is I really help people understand their users and help our clients build better businesses. For instance, despite my youthful looks, I spent nearly half a decade specializing around behavioral design and human-centered design, writing research papers around the specific field. Just before we jump into the actual content of the presentation, just a little bit around more of what we do at Yaya. So at Yaya, we believe really are putting the user at the center of everything. And the way we do this is by talking to users and to stakeholders and iteratively come up with new ideas and actually test these ideas. The outcome of this, generally speaking, is a product that not only works for the business, but it's a product that people actually love. On top of this, we also do some brand work and we also do some user research packs for different types of companies. For the moment, we mainly specialize within the financial space and of course the tech space, partnering with Severi, but we've also worked in many different industries ranging from dog health apps all the way to navigation apps. Right, so with that out of the way, I guess the first section is, again, why you should really care about human-centered design. So for that, I'm going to be talking about housing. So my mum works in construction industry, and she used to teach me there's two ways to build a house. There's a construction-led approach, where you're asking questions such as, what kind of bricks do I need? How many bedrooms do you have to build? And how deep do the foundations need to be to build a very solid home? Or there's the human-centered approach. And here, I can't stress enough, you're asking very different questions. Instead, you're asking, well, who lives here? How do they live? And of course, what are their goals with this property? Is this a family home, or is this people like friends or students living together? And the outcome of this is a development-led approach. The outcome is you build a house that's not going to fall down. It does the job. While a human-centered approach is not only will you build a house that doesn't fall down, but really you build a home that people actually want to live in. Now, I know we're not here talking about housing, and you're probably wondering, this is great, no, but I don't care. I don't build houses for a living. Why are you telling me this? And the reason why is we see technology the same way. There's two ways to build technology. There's the development approach, where you're asking, what systems do I need to implement? How much code do I have to write? Where's this data going to be stored at the end of the day? Or there's a human-centered approach, which again, you're asking very different questions. Here you want to know, well, who's going to be using the product? What are their day-to-day needs? And finally, how will this product impact the business in the future? Again, the outcome for a development-led approach is you'll have a product that works. Again, it will do the job. Or again, a human-centered approach where not only will you have a product that works, but again, it's a product that people would want. It's a product that people can pick up and just intuitively get it. And I'm probably conscious enough as well. Like doing this way, customers can understand the value of the product in matters of a second. There's no need for long onboarding tutorials or complex marketing schemes or gimmicks. The product just simply fits into people's daily lives.
Thanks, Emilio. So moving on to section 2, we're going to be looking at what exactly human-centered design is. We looked at kind of like why you should love it, but what human-centered design actually is. Now, it's an approach to problem solving that places the needs, desires, and behaviors of the people at the forefront of the design process. It involves understanding and empathizing, very importantly, empathizing with users, involving them at every step of the design and iteration stage, and creating solutions that align with their values and their aspirations. The aim of human-centered design is to create innovative and effective solutions, technical solutions, could be anything, doesn't have to be software, by prioritizing the human experience, ultimately leading to products, services, or systems that are intuitive, usable, and meaningful to their users that they're designed for. By getting to the heart of your users, you're ensuring high levels of satisfaction, fostering increased adoption rates, and cultivating a customer loyalty. Additionally, comprehending your users allows you to anticipate their future needs, providing you with a competitive edge by delivering innovative and relevant solutions. By involving users in the idea-generating stages of designing, you'll often come across comments such as like, wouldn't it be great if, or how about we, which can lead to developments of new features or software solutions, which otherwise could potentially be overlooked. By prioritizing these users and aligning your design with their perspectives, you have the power to create products that make a profound impact on their lives, while simultaneously driving the resounding success of your business. This here is David Kelly. He is the founder of IDEO, a company at the very forefront of the human-centered design approach to problem solving. Now, he established that the earlier that you test solutions and subsequently fail with them, the sooner you'll end up with a result that actually works. And in doing so, you're not wasting time and expenses developing products that simply won't work or resonate with their intended users. Fail faster so you can succeed sooner, is the quote. And human-centered design isn't just about creating interfaces for software or applications. It's needed across all aspects of life. For instance, who's used a remote control before? I think everybody here probably has. But do you think this particular remote control here has been designed using a human-centered approach, or has it just been designed to fit all the buttons on a remote in a structured way so that they, are all there and accessible? I, for one, don't even know what half the buttons actually probably do on that remote, on that particular one. But how about this one? Okay, obviously it's the Amazon Fire Stick control. Nice, simple. You've only got 7 buttons on the whole thing, plus a little circular part to the top where you navigate. Do you think that this was the first thing that the designers came up with when they were challenged to create a remote for the Amazon Fire Stick? That's very, very unlikely. The reality is this final version probably had 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 iterations before getting to this point. Another great example of human-centered design is the Norman door. You can see here that the handles are on the same side as the word push that's engraved into it. But why is the word push needed here? If the handles weren't there, then the words push wouldn't be needed, right? I, for one, know that the majority of us here, if we were faced with these doors the first time, you would grab the handles and you try and pull them towards you. This is what we call a Norman door, after Don Norman, author of The Design of Everyday Things and godfather of design thinking. The Norman door is any door that confuses its users through wrong usability, requiring special signage to clarify how they work, such as the push labeling in this instance. So what does an ideal door look like? It's a door that's designed with its user at the forefront of its purpose, a door that is intuitive to use and does not require any explanation at all. Simply a handle to pull and a push plate to push. Nothing else should be required. Now, before, when Emilio said, I don't build houses, why is this appropriate to me? A similar kind of thing can be applied here. This door is an example of it's a simplified example of what human-centered design can do. The reality is often far more complex. And here at Yaya, we follow a simple framework to help us approach these more complex problems. This here that you see, this double diamond, is a problem-solving framework commonly associated with human-centered design. It's one that we follow, and it's called the double diamond model. You can see why. It is a visual representation of the design process and highlights the iterative nature of solving complex problems, while keeping the focus on the user needs and experiences. The framework consists of 4 distinct phases, organized into 2 diamond shapes, hence the name double diamond, which we'll go into a little bit more later. But we'll go through from a high level, we'll go through the framework now briefly. The first diamond represents the initial phase of the design process. It's a divergent phase, which means that we aim to gather as much information and deep understanding of the problem at hand and the people who we are designing for by gathering as much information as possible. This can be done during this phase through research, gathering insights, identifying underlying challenges and opportunities. But the goal here is ultimately to explore the problem as broadly as possible, without jumping to any solutions too quickly. There's a process to follow. Emilio will be taking you through a couple of the techniques that we use here during this discovery phase a little bit later. After the discovery phase, we move into the second section, which is define. This is where we define problems that we're facing. This is a convergence phase, meaning that we distill down all the information that we have gathered from phase 1. Here we synthesize the research findings, the insights gathered from the previous phase, and narrow down to focus and identify the core problems and opportunities that we need to address. Here we identify things such as user personas or target audiences. Generally, the outcome of this phase is some form of written strategy report or document that we use to establish that the client and ourselves are still trying to solve the same problem that we set out for. Sometimes the question that we may have been asking in the first place sometimes needs to get reframed. And this reframing allows us to solve the problems that the users themselves has helped us identify in that discovery phase. Now, you may have noticed we're following the 4 Ds in the double diamond framework. So far, discovering and defining. And you may have noticed that the third part is titled develop, but let's just hold on a second, because it doesn't actually mean that we're going to be starting to develop and build just yet. We don't even know what we're going to be building. The third phase of this double diamond is where we develop our ideas. It involves generating and exploring a wide range of possible solutions. This phase, again, is characterized by divergent thinking, where designers and stakeholders brainstorm, ideate, and prototype different concepts and approaches. We'll be, again, covering some of these techniques a little bit later. And then the final phase represents delivery. This is where designers and developers refine and iterate on the selected solution that we're going to take forward from the previous development phase. The phase involves testing and validating the ideas through prototypes and getting feedback from actual users, and ultimately deliver a final solution or final product that meets the needs and expectations of the users.
Right, well, hopefully at this stage, you know why we're doing human-centered design and what the process looks like. Hopefully at this stage, like, yeah, I get it. I'm sold on the idea, but again, like, how do I actually implement this in my day-to-day work? Like, what exactly is this? This is what we're going to be covering this section, somewhat at a high level. So we're going to be going through understanding user needs, which is the first half of the diamond process. After that, building the user personas. So this kind of define the problem. After that, coming up with multiple different ideas, which is the third phase. And then lastly, covering, as Phil mentioned, how do you pick certain solutions to actually implement? So this would be done through prototyping and user testing. So first thing first, user needs. Now, I should probably preface with this. There's actually a bunch of different ways and a wide different tools that you can use to actually diagnose and understand users' needs. I'm just going to be going through four. These four are the ones that we generally use, but we also would use other tools. First things first is desk research. So desk research really is an activity that is quick and can be done online. Generally speaking, this can be looking at trends, at market analysis, competitors, around that kind of ideas. Really at this stage, what this was quite useful for is really to understand quickly the big picture of what the market looks like for your products. Next is surveys. So surveys is you would send a long list of questions to users, and the benefit from this is you get a lot of quantitative data back at quite a large scale. Now, I should probably preface with this. There's quite an art in creating a really good survey. Not every survey is created equally. For example, a survey asking a user, what are your goals with this product? It's a really good survey. A survey asking, do you like the button? Isn't the right question.
Ask away.
Right, sorry about that. Sorry, interviews. So this is another tool we use. Actually, this is probably the tool that we recommend using the most if you're going to do this process. It's probably the best one. User interviews is very similar to a survey. You have a long list of questions. The only key difference here is you can actually drill down quite quickly to the root problem of the specific user. And the way you usually do this is we recommend asking 5 times why. The reason for this is, let's say, for example, the product is around designing sleep for a user, and you're looking like the sleeps, why people are sleeping in specific ways. You can ask a user quite quickly, why do you struggle to wake up in the morning? I know I do. And the user might come back saying like, well, I only slept 5 hours. That's great. And most people might actually stop there going, okay, the problem is they slept 5 hours. So the solution should be around, increasing that time being, asleep from 5 to, let's say, the recommended 8. And that solution might work. It might, do the job. But again, if you go back to that user and ask, well, why did you sleep 5 hours? And they might say, oh, it's because I was tossing and turning a lot last night. Okay, well, why were you tossing and turning a lot last night? Well, it's because I was quite stressed because of work, and that affected, my bedtime routine. And already there, you address just in 3 whys. And recommend again, we technically be going much more in depth, but you really understand the problem is very different to what you initially thought, and the outcome of that is, if you go down the first route, you kind of just like the top level symptoms of the problem. But if you really just drill down and actually get to the root of the problem, whatever solution you'll make and create will actually be way more efficient and way better for the end user and also for the business. And then lastly, immersion. So immersion simply is an activity where you actually become the user yourself. This activity is somewhat hard to do. Let's say, for example, if you're designing for submarines, there's probably a pun somewhere in there about immersion, but that's probably not something you can easily do. You can't really immerse yourself as a submarine. But let's say you're designing, in which we did this actually for one of our clients, around a fitness app. It makes a lot of sense to download the app, sign up to a gym, and actually use the app. And again, the point of this activity is you actually quite quickly will generate a lot of meaningful insights where you might realize like actually a pain point is while workout, tapping next workout on my phone every 5 minutes is actually really annoying. Like, is there a better way of doing that? Or additionally, you might observe other people at the gym, and you're like, oh, why is that person doing that? I've never seen someone, do that specific behavior. And again, at this point, you're just generating a lot of really good insights around why people, act in specific ways. So, that's quite a lot. The way I usually like to think about research is usually on a scale between, what's okay research, what's really, really good research. The way I kind of think about the scale, generally speaking, is, the closer you are to the user or the closer you are to a real world scenario, the better the insight you're going to generate. For instance, let's say you're designing for a website. You can do some desk research to understand what pages will I actually need to have on the website. But if you actually sat down with someone, with one of your users, and interviewed them and asked, well, why are you on my website? What are you looking for specifically? That's going to generate not only the pages you will need, but the content, and also understand, like, okay, how are they interacting on the website? And that's going to be a much better website than if you just did some desk research. Just to closing this section up, really at this stage, you don't want to know what actions people are taking or how they're doing it. You really just want to get down to the why, like what's the problem? This leads us to the second phase, which is user personas. So again, probably by then, at this stage, you would have a lot of insights. Now, the kind of key aspect to do is to summarize and define your problem. One thing we recommend is using personas. Just in case no one knows what personas are, is just a fictional person that summarizes a group of people. Generally speaking, let's say if you talk to 15 people, you might have 2 to 3 personas. Now, how do you actually build a persona? So first thing first, you actually would map the data out. Now you can map the data by, users' needs, their goals, aspirations, marketing channels, demographic, really whatever makes sense for your product. Then after that, you'd be finding themes and actually finding themes that relate to one another. For example, you might find that a lot of your users live in London. That's one theme. And a lot of users, a lot of those type of users look up the web in the morning. That's the second theme. And those 2 themes relate. And the reason you do that relation theme is once you come to, creating personas, you want to find themes that relate to each other, that, relates to each other, that relates to, a group of people. Now, another thing about personas, like a good tip, is you actually don't want to include all the information, all the insights you find. You only want to include the insights that make sense, specifically for the product. The information that you might have in a persona varies from, product to product. But information could be maybe around their objectives, their wants, the brands they might like, their goals in life, etc. The reason, again, why we're building these personas isn't just for the sake of building stuff and just throwing it away afterwards. It's mainly because in the next 2 phases, once you come up with ideas and you actually implement a final solution, you really just want to sit down with the team and ask, well, does this idea help, in this case, Mohammed? Will Mohammed like the idea? Will Mohammed understand the idea? Does this idea fit into Mohammed's life? And finally, once you've implemented a solution, not only does it help Mohammed, but does it help the other personas you've identified?
Right. Thanks, Emilio. So, as we touched on earlier when we were looking at the framework, the third phase of Double Diamond is develop. That's where we use the information garnered from the workshops, etc., that Emilio has just been explaining, and come up with the ideas on how to actually solve those problems which have been identified. Now, it's easy to fall upon the first or one of the first ideas that you might come up with. Okay, it may be that that first idea is potentially the best single idea that anybody could have come up with to solve the problem that has been identified for you to solve. But the reality is that's very, very unlikely. Out of all the ideas, however, it's estimated that actually during these sessions, only about 10% are just all right. Not good, but just all right. So it's incredibly important that you dedicate enough time and resources to that or to this phase of the framework. So ideation, what is this? This is a phase that focuses on generating a wide range of creative ideas to address the identified user needs and challenges, the identified users that Emilio spoke about. During this ideation stage, designers, stakeholders, and other relevant parties come together to brainstorm, collaborate, and explore the potential solutions. The participants are encouraged to think outside of the box, challenge assumptions, and explore unconventional possibilities. The process helps to uncover new perspectives and innovative approaches that may not have been initially considered. So why is it so important? Why are ideation sessions so important? because the stronger your ideation stage is in the framework, the easier your stage 4 with prototyping and testing stage is going to be. This is because you'll already have concise, considered ranges of problems and solutions to be able to prototype and test before your product and service is even ready to interact with the consumers. Without this ideation phase, the problem statement merely remains as a problem and never actually advances into anything productive. It's also important to consider that the wider range of participants in these ideation sessions will lead to better results. Of course, it's important to have key stakeholders, decision makers, etc. in these sessions. But what about the customer-facing support personnel? What about the engineers or the sales team members? All of these different people will bring different perspectives to the table and different ideas. So we're quickly going to cover just 5 very quick steps on how we facilitate an effective ideation session here at Yaya. We love our post-it notes, by the way. First thing you want to do to the group is present the challenge. Make it a real clear articulation of the challenge or problem statement that they're going to be trying to solve. You want to provide relevant background information, context, okay, that's going to help them understand and try and create solutions from a human-centered perspective. Questions such as, how might we, or what can we do about, help to frame the problem in a real clear way. This leads us on to the brainstorming section. So once they understand what they have to do, this is where they're encouraged to generate as many ideas as possible related to the challenge or the problem posed. You want to use divergent thinking techniques here, such as subject or mind mapping to explore a wider range of ideas. Participants, we try and say to them, like, we don't want to, or we want to defer judgment here. There should be an open forum where any idea is a good idea. And it's quite often that the out there ideas are quite often the best ones. It's normally a good idea to timestamp this exercise to maybe 10, 15 minutes or so. And this really helps participants actually get focused and get their ideas down on paper. After the brainstorming phase, we have the participants share their ideas with the group. And this can be writing up on the whiteboard or using sticky notes, so everybody can see what they've written. We need to encourage them to explain their ideas in detail and provide any supporting information or insights. And this leads to a group discussion and like synthesis of what we've come up with, the ideas we've come up with. In a very similar way to what Emilio spoke about before when we're trying to create these personas, we want to be looking for patterns and themes and trying to find the connections between the different ideas and group them together. We want to encourage participants to build upon each other's ideas, explore potential solutions, and develop those ideas that are on the whiteboard and push them further. Once we've decided on maybe 5 or 6 of the best and most promising ideas, we go through a method of prioritization and refinement. We use methods like dot voting, where individuals in the group are given a number of votes by placing a dot on the ideas that they like in the groupings. And then at the end of the session, when everyone's finished with their dots, the ideas that have the most dots and the most votes get taken forward to the next stage. So that takes us in, that's the end of the ideation phase. So we're going to take 1 or 2 of these ideas forward. And the idea here is to be able to test these ideas out on real users. But how do we test these ideas? We have to prototype them. Prototyping and user testing is the final stage of this double diamond framework, but it is by far the most iterative, which means going around in circles. You'll find the process of prototyping and testing means many stages of iterating, testing, etc. And this helps the users, obviously, the users will be challenging and bringing the results to the prototype. But this is all part of the course. It's all expected. And when you're following the human-centered design approach, it's ultimately why we use this approach. It's to land upon the best solution to the problem. And if that means iterating and changing the prototypes, that's it. Once we have chosen the idea from the ideation sessions, covering prototypes again here, sorry. Prototyping is the next step. From prototyping can be conceptual prototypes, just an idea of asking broader questions, to actually fully fledged high fidelity designs of the actual finished product. Prototypes can take various forms such as sketches, basic wireframes, storyboards, or full-fledged interactive mock-ups. The purpose of prototyping is to bring the ideas to life, to visualize them so people can understand them, and to test them with the real-life users. It is, of course, the alternative to building the software for real and testing with these live solutions, which of course has implied costs and time considerations. In the words of Mr. Kelly, who we spoke about before, it allows us to fail quicker and test quicker. Okay, user testing. So as previously mentioned, prototyping allows us to iterate on designs quickly based upon the user feedback. But where do we get this user feedback from? It's from the process of user testing. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with these processes. User testing allows us to gather invaluable feedback, insights directly from the individuals who we are designing for. And as Emilio said, when we're testing, we're always thinking about those personas. Will Mohammed be happy with this? Does it answer his questions? By involving users in the testing process, we truly understand how they interact with the products or services, identify pain points that they might have, and uncover opportunities for improvement. So what are the benefits of user testing? It allows us in real time to see how real users interact with the product. This helps us uncover usability issues such as confusing interfaces, maybe unclear instructions, functional problems, unclear messaging. And when we run our user tests here at Yaya, we tend to merely prompt users if they become confused. We tend very much to take a backseat and let the users just run with the test. Questions like, how would you expect it to behave? Or what would you do next? Help move the user along, but gather critical information on what their expectations were in the first place. We ask the users to simply narrate their thinking, talk us through every step of the process that they're on. This helps us identify both positive and negative aspects of the design. And we're very clear at the start, when we start with the users, that there's no such thing as negative feedback. If anything, we want them to highlight issues so that we can go and fix them. It helps us to validate assumptions and design decisions. So some of these decisions may get made earlier on in the design process, larger, more broader decisions. This validation can reduce the risk of investing in features or design elements that may not resonate with users, or bigger picture questions. An example of this was we were user testing with Bastion Zero. Some of the members here joining on this webinar working for Cyber may have worked on this project, but it's a SaaS onboarding security platform. And we were charged with digitalizing their onboarding journey last year. We tested from a conceptual level how users would respond to a background script running the full installation process, which would have the whole thing done in a matter of seconds. We tested this from a high level, and the feedback was a conclusive no. All the users wanted to know exactly what was being installed on the machines and would have spent longer retrospectively checking and gone back to see what had happened more, and that would take longer than the step-by-step installation process would have taken in the first place. So it's these kind of things that get answered with some of these validation questions. And finally, iterative design improvements, as we touched on. It's an iterative process that allows designers and developers to refine and optimize the design based on the feedback. By observing this user feedback, listening to suggestions, developers and designers can make informed decisions on how to improve that product. Iterative testing and design cycles help ensure the final product meets these users' needs and expectations.
Right. Well, I mean, that's wraps up, I guess the double down process. Just last, 2-3 slides here. Just general tips and tricks that we recommend if running this process. First things first, as Phil just mentioned right now, is the idea of iteration. Iteration doesn't only mean that you do at the last phase, but it's actually something you'll probably do through each single phase of the double diamond process. But equally as a whole process, like the double diamond process might seem quite linear, but actually once you finally implemented the final solution, in reality, you probably want to go back and actually test and research and ideate even more. Whatever is the final solution you've created, again, it's a really good solution, but again, can always be improved. Secondly, we touched on this on the ideation aspect, but it's this idea that of collaboration, and collaboration should be done with everyone throughout the entire process. I'm probably conscious this enough, everyone really should be involved at each stage. And again, certainly during the ideation phase where everyone comes up with ideas. And there's one thing I always hear quite often, and I disagree with completely, when people say, oh, I'm not very creative, I'm not very good at coming up with ideas, I don't want to join the session. Realistically, the best ideas come from the likeliest places, and certainly the person. I remember one project, one that I found ideas originally came from, I think, the personal assistant, just to give an idea. But really, if you do this right, this what distinguishes to me a good design process with a really, really good design process. And lastly, accessibility, inclusivity. I mean, we're big advocates for this here at Yaya. And the way we generally recommend doing this is by including these type of people throughout the entire process in the research, defining, testing. I'm not going to go too much in depth because actually I really like this picture that I found. I think I stole this from IBM, but nevertheless, this to me shows why you should have the idea of accessibility in mind when you're creating designs and solutions. And lastly, kind of similar to what Paul did, general books that we recommend for additional resources. I mean, one of them is Sprints. It's a book written by Jake Knapp. It's what actually Google uses to come up with ideas and test, if that gives you an idea. The other one, which Phil also mentioned, is Don Norman, Design of Everyday Things. It's probably the Bible of UX thinking and human-centered design thinking. And lastly, Emotional Design, which covers why people like certain things, even though they're not functional, and there's definitely better things out there for it, which is also an interesting read. But that's about it. I mean, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully you're convinced about the power of human-centered design. I think we've got a few more minutes for a Q&A session, but if you're too shy, or actually you want to learn more, I've put my details there, and also the number for Yaya, as well as a QR code, which would push you to a Google Meets with me at a time that suits you best. But yeah, thank you very much, and we're open to questions.
Thank you so much, guys. And we have questions for you too. Actually, guys, if you have any more questions, you can just drop them in the chat. And now I'll read those two quite interesting ones, by the way. So the first one comes from Aleix Kutepov. Using TV remote example, as you showed in your presentation, first one includes all the functionality which is available. Most of it is not used by everyone, and it's too complex for an average user. Using human-centered design, the remote is simplified, like shown in an Amazon example, but it also loses all the functionality which is needed by the minority of users. What is the correct approach to balance the needs of different types of users? Feels wrong just to cut off needs of the groups for the benefit of the other. What do you think?
You want me to take a crack at it?
Go, yeah.
Right. So no, I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, yeah, the Amazon Fire Stick is probably a good example in the sense of like, well, what if I'm blind and I can't, or what if there's a bunch of extreme use cases. The way we again advocate for it is including those people throughout the process. But there's different possibilities and solutions when it comes to, I guess in design we call it extreme users. I actually hate the name of extreme users. But there's different possibilities of doing it. I mean, one, if you include all the functionalities, from a business perspective, there's possibilities of rolling out additional products that aim to actually specific types of users. I think a good example of that was, I think Alessi came out with cutlery, for example. I think it was Alessi, I might be wrong. But Alessi came out with cutlery designs that work for, of course, a fork and a knife that people and I can use. But they also designed specific cutlery that were aimed for people with disabilities, specifically Parkinson's, people who had really severe shakes. And when it comes to that, it can be a sensitive topic. I mean, that's one solution. Again, there's different ways of doing, but in that case of the cutlery, it's also quite sensitive because you need to design things in a way that doesn't kind of like belittle people, where people feel like, oh, I feel like I have to use a specific cutlery, I'm a less human person, quote unquote. That again comes a lot from like collaborating and talking to those type of users. Yeah, I think that generally is my view and take on it. But around functionality, it very much depends on the type of product, like how you bury it specifically.
Okay, Phil, do you have anything to add?
I was going to say that really it's the question almost answers itself, where you say that the minority of users don't use half of the functionality there. So from a human-centered design purpose, it's, do they need to be on there? If we can find an alternative way where the function of these 7 buttons that remain fulfill the requirements of all the users that we're looking at, then we don't need to have the 45, 50, 60 different buttons on for individual purposes, when we can repurpose individual buttons to do more than one job, essentially. Yes, the whole process, we have to take into consideration, as Emilio said, the accessibility from a whole range of things. But really, it's about simplifying, and as technology obviously improves the ability for functions to, or individual single pieces to be able to kind of do different functions, will also increase as well. That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you, Emilio. And thanks, Alice, for asking a very great question. And moving on to another question from you. What are the most common reasons for differences emerging between what initial interviews and surveys revealed and what user testing reveals?
Right. Common reasons for differences emerging between what initial interviews and surveys. I would say that's mainly down to practicalities of during the ideation sessions and then the prototyping, building a functional, actually existing product or prototype. The first 2 stages where we are discovering and then defining, it really is kind of living in an ideal world. And the reality is that while we aspire and really try to complete this process and come up with the ideal solution, there will be times where there will be bumps in the road, where things will not be able to necessarily be completed with that perfect rose tinted glasses that we started the process of. But the idea of this iteration and prototyping and testing will give us a solution to the problem that has initially been stated. So I'm working myself around in circles here a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's when you're iterating and iterating, you are improving and improving. And the idea, the goal is to reach that final destination of perfection. But sometimes when you take the rose tinted glasses off, we get as close to what we can, but it's never quite the ideal solution, I think. Does that make?
Yeah, that makes sense. Basically summarizing it is the difference between surveys and initial interviews compared to user testing at the end is the surveys and interviews is kind of the foundation that you lay, and it's what you think is going to happen. And the test and the user testing is once you've kind of done that huge leap of like all that massive research, the testing is just refining it down all the way to, you know, a really good solution, pretty much. And that's why you usually do a lot of iterations towards the end. You know, the iterations towards the end isn't grand, because otherwise, I mean, that's a lot of cost and a lot of time wasted. Like certainly if the research was bad, that's kind of like how we view it. That's like the key difference between the surveys interviews in the beginning, where you're understanding the whys, and then towards the end, it's more like the what's in the house.
Okay, thank you so much, Emilio and Phil. I hope this Oh, we have one more comment. Yeah, Alice also thanks you for your reply. Thank you so much. And maybe like we're running out of time now, but maybe just a quick advice for all of the people who joined us today, like from you, coming from you. Any advice for integrating that into, practically into their work?
I would say read. There's so much literature out there, from the books that we mentioned to case studies and all sorts of what you call
What?
papers, research papers. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. It's late on. But yeah, just read. It's actually we've only kind of scratched the surface with this presentation. If you read more, you'll really find out the benefits of human-centered design and how it can be applied. And of course, speak to us.
Yeah,
I would say.
yeah. If I can add on an advice that I think it's also quite useful. Certainly if you get like, oh, I can read, and we provide references, but like, what can I actually start? I think next time you open a door, or next time you do something and something really annoying pops up, it's like, God, that's so annoying. Like, why is it like that? Actually think of it, like actually write down on a piece of paper, like, why is it like that? Why am I having that frustration? Why am I really frustrated at this specific thing? And once you know that, then you can maybe like, in your own time, like, oh, what if I could design a better solution to it and actually practice what we taught today?
On top of that, it's not just the things that frustrate you, but it's the things that you don't notice.
Yeah,
and that's where human-centered design and putting the user first has really worked. Like, there's so many apps out there that you go through the whole onboarding stage, or it just becomes so intuitive to you, you don't notice that you've gone through this process because it's all just it's so perfect.
Yeah.
So think about those moments as well, not just the moments that annoy you, but think about things that work, that you just kind of go through life without realizing they're there. They're the real things that you think, oh, I wonder how they did that. That's where the value comes.
Yeah, that's actually great advice. Thank you so much for it.